Unconditional love, joy, peace, and appreciation to all of you for tuning in. My name is Tyler Ellison, and I'm going to be delivering to you a transmission from my guide Riok. So I am very excited to share this information with you. It has been on the tip of my tongue, so to say, for the last 48 hours or so, give or take. So I am happy to now have a level of clarity within myself where I'm able to now fluidly and fluently deliver this transmission. So sit on back, enjoy, and thank you all for your attention. All right, and we thank you so much for the co-creation of this interaction. It is our civilization's highest joy, passion, and excitement to be able to deliver this information to you. We will begin this transmission with the following idea. Your consciousness makes sense, so to say, of your physical reality experience through utilizing the idea of story structure. Understand that story in that way is, generally speaking, a narrative that is based on the idea of experience through linearity. In that sense, because you exist, so to say, in a reality experience that utilizes linear space-time, your consciousness, as a side effect of this, so to say, utilizes the idea of story structure to make sense of the idea of that linear experience. So in that way, your consciousness utilizes belief systems and definitions that impose meaning upon the idea of the props of that story. If the beliefs and definitions are positive, generally speaking, you experience a positive story, a positive experience. If the beliefs and definitions are negative, you experience a negative story, a negative experience. And it is in that way that you use your beliefs to create your reality. You use your beliefs in that sense as building blocks for the idea of a greater narrative that represents the different stories that you tell yourself to make sense of your linear experience of physical reality. Now understand, story structure exists on other levels of consciousness too. It's not just limited to the idea of physical reality, for in that sense, space and time also exist, so to say, in higher frequency realms of consciousness, what you consider to be non-physical levels of consciousness or spiritual levels of consciousness. Space and time still has a relevance there. However, it's not as, so to say, pertinent and pronounced as it is in your physical reality experience. So understand, story structure still exists within the higher levels of spirit, within the higher levels of consciousness, but it has in that way a greater level of linear expression and relevance in the physical reality. And one of the other unique distinguishing features, so to say, of story from a physical reality point of view versus a non-physical reality point of view is in the physical reality experience, it is your belief systems that create the experience of story. Where in the higher levels of consciousness, it's not beliefs that are utilized to, in that sense, experience and create story. In that way, the types of energies that organize story on both higher levels of consciousness and lower levels of consciousness are the idea of what you consider to be archetypal expressions of consciousness. Archetypes in that way represent patterns of energy that forms of consciousness will choose to align with, so they can, in that sense, experience certain stories. In the physical reality, so to say, beings utilize belief systems to align with the idea of story and plot and narrative. And depending on the belief and depending on the subject that the belief is applied to, a certain archetypal theme of consciousness, an archetypal organization of energy will be selected to, in that sense, give greater organization and form to that story experience. Now, the archetypes in that sense are utilized in the higher levels of consciousness, in the spirit realm, but again, it's not belief systems so much that align with them. Rather, it is the being's own knowingness, it is the being's own energy, so to say, and their own nature that aligns them with particular archetypes. Where on Earth, in the physical reality experience, it is your belief systems and how you use them that aligns you with specific archetypes. Now, in terms of the different archetypes, there are infinite expressions of archetypal energy. Just as you experience infinite expressions of personalities and people, there are infinite expressions of archetypes. However, generally speaking, there are 12 major archetypes that have been organized by your psychologist Carl Jung, and these represent the 12 general archetypes that your consciousness expresses in your physical reality life. And the idea is some of these archetypes are more relevant for you than others, but generally speaking, your consciousness will experience and express all of them to varying degrees and different ways throughout your physical life. You will find, however, there are some that really resonate with you, that you find very much reflect the themes you are exploring in your reality. And that's because, as we have said, on the higher levels of consciousness in spirit, archetypes are still used, and they in many ways reflect, so to say, the natural energy of a particular soul or a particular spirit or a particular oversoul or a particular form of consciousness. So in that sense, you could say your soul exhibits certain archetypal preferences of expression, and it will play that out in different lifetimes. So in that sense, you could say that certain archetypes are very relevant to you as a being and are very relevant to you as a soul. But again, generally speaking, you will express all of the major 12 to varying degrees depending on what you're exploring. Now, understand, there are different expressions of archetypes, but some of the major ones are the following: the healer, the hero, the magician, the creator, the ruler, the sage. These are, in that sense, some of the major archetypes that are very much relevant for many of you in relationship to your process of reality co-creation. In the sense that the major archetypes that we have just mentioned, generally speaking, are some of the most pertinent archetypal themes that we detect are being expressed in your collective consciousness. And as you begin to sculpt and shape your reality in a way that reflects your highest preference, these are the archetypal themes that we detect are very much alive and active within all of you. Now understand, it is, as we have said, your beliefs that organize story, and it is your story, so to say, that goes into resonance with one of these 12 or the 6 that we mentioned, major archetypal expressions. It's your story that will, in that sense, align you with a particular archetype. And in that sense, as we have said, a positive meaning aligns you with a positive story. A negative meaning aligns you with a negative story. It is these positive and negative stories that will align you with either positive or negative expressions of archetypal consciousness. We will give you an example here. The idea is that the hero can be experienced in both a positive and negative way in terms of archetypal expression. A positive expression of the hero consciousness would be the following. A being that, from a knowingness of their true power, a knowingness of who their true state is and what their true state is, chooses to then engage with the reality in a way that represents boldly going into the unknown, knowing that they can handle whatever challenge they find as they move throughout their preferred adventure. That represents a positive expression of hero archetypal consciousness. Negative expressions of hero archetypal consciousness would be the following example. A being that feels and believes that they are powerless and that they are up against some kind of challenge that is going to consume them and destroy them. So in order to overcome this challenge, they must act in ways that are not in full alignment with their own integrity. They must cheat, or they must act in ways that compromise, so to say, who they are, or their sense of who they are, in order to overcome that challenge. Both of these expressions contain the archetype of the hero, but as you can see, it's the underlying belief systems about that individual and their challenge that determines how they express and experience that archetypal theme of the hero. So, one of the things you can do in that sense to understand how you're creating your reality, how you're writing your own story, is to, in that sense, determine what types of archetypes you are drawn to. Which one of the major archetypes resonates the most with you? Maybe there's a few, and you'll find that oftentimes you blend and weave certain archetypes together. But recognize some of them will be more relevant to you than others. And through understanding the idea of the archetypes that you are drawn to and the idea of their positive expression and negative expression, you can begin to understand, so to say, the type of negative or positive beliefs that you are engaging with that are, in that sense, giving rise to your physical reality experience. So, for example, if you find that a certain archetype resonates with you, and you also find that you're going through particular challenges that do not represent your highest preference, then begin in that sense to look at your challenge and your theme and your story and see if it lines up with one of the major archetypes that you're drawn to. And begin to then investigate, so to say, the shadow side of the archetype. And you will find through learning about the shadow and light side of the archetype, you can get an understanding for what some of those negative belief systems might be that you're using that are actually creating the challenges or the situations that you say you do not prefer. And through letting those belief systems go, you can then transform your experience of that challenge. So the challenge can, in that sense, be much more light, much more fun, and you can then experience navigation of that challenge and your life from the point of view of the positive archetype. And in that sense, you will find that aligning with the positive archetype to, in that sense, navigate that challenge is as easy as simply redefining the idea of some of those archetypal qualities in a positive light. In other words, tell yourself a new story to shift to a positive expression of the archetype. And to tell yourself a new story, all you must do is assign new positive definitions to yourself and to the situation and its content, and then take, with no expectation, positive action that reflects those new definitions, that reflects that new story, so you can, in that sense, align with the light or positive version, so to say, of the archetypal expression of consciousness, thus allowing for that archetypal power and energy to flow through you, so you, in that sense, can navigate the challenge very lucidly in a way that represents your true preference. One of the ways you can begin to explore the idea of your challenge, so to say, and the idea of the beliefs, the stories, and the archetypal energies involved is to first and foremost go into the neutral point of view. For understand, when you are operating as the character in your story, sometimes evaluating your own life can be like attempting to observe the forest while you are immersed, so to say, in it. Trying to see the forest through the trees, as they say. So allow for yourself, when you wish to examine the idea of your beliefs, of your stories, and the corresponding archetypes, allow for yourself to go into the neutral point of view first and foremost. Go into a state of neutrality, a state of openness, a state of allowance. For understand, this allows for you, in that sense, to vibrate in a way that raises your frequency to be above the idea, so to say, of the negative expressions of energy, the negative expressions of beliefs, story, and archetype. For understand, neutrality vibrates at a faster frequency than negativity. So if you find you are, in that sense, attempting to evaluate some of these beliefs that may be darker or more negative, the idea is to go into the neutral point of view through relaxation, through breathing, through letting go, going into that neutral point of view. And while you are in this neutral point of view, go into the idea of observation of what is happening in the idea of the story of your life. Imagining that your situation is a scene in a movie. And very clearly, very plainly saying, what is happening in this scene? What type of archetypal expression of consciousness am I embodying? What type of archetypal expression am I projecting onto the other person? Am I making myself a hero and the other person a villain? Am I making myself a healer and the other person a sick person? And so on and so forth. Begin to address first what is archetypally taking place in relationship to the story. And then allow for yourself to then observe the dynamics that are taking place. Am I expressing positive action in relationship to my archetypal role? In relationship to the other person? In relationship to the challenge? Am I taking positive action or am I taking negative action? Oh, I'm taking negative action? All right. Well, the only reason I would take a negative action is because I'm buying into a negative belief system that says I have to. So what would that belief system have to be in order for my character to feel they must express themselves in that way? And that will assist you in, so to say, dialing back the content and perspective of your life so you can then observe it from that audience member neutral point of view, like you're watching a film. And you will find that you can very rapidly, through addressing the archetypes, addressing the story, and then observing the actions that are being played out, you can then understand with greater clarity some of the belief systems that you may be utilizing. And through making those beliefs conscious, you then let them go automatically. They become released once they become conscious. And if it feels like, for whatever reason, the belief system is holding on for dear life and you can't seem to let it go, compare it and contrast it against what we have called the three fundamentals The three fundamentals are: I am unconditional love, I am an indestructible, immortal being, and I unconditionally co-create everything in my reality. And if the belief system construct does not line up with those three fundamentals, then it's inherently false and you can let it go. Once you have let that belief system go, you have effectively let go of your attachment to that particular reality, to that particular expression of yourself, to that particular movie. And you can then, so to say, shift yourself to a new movie through the idea of redefining yourself and the other person and the situation in a way that represents your highest preference. Now, to bring this all together, as we have said, you may have noticed through evaluating the negative scene in the movie that there are certain archetypal expressions at play, and it is likely you are experiencing the idea in those negative scenes, the negative expressions of the archetype. So if you wish, you can then evaluate the positive expressions of the archetype. So you can then understand more clearly what types of belief systems may be of greatest service to you in relationship to the ones you can craft and select to, in that sense, create the movie scene of your preference. And the idea is begin, if you wish, to craft new belief systems that represent the positive expression of those archetypes. And you can then, so to say, experience the scene unfolding in a different way. Now, understand, you can also, in that sense, draw upon other archetypal expressions altogether, if you wish, to create a very different organization of that scene. You can draw upon any of the archetypes that you feel the most resonance with, that you feel are of the greatest reflection of your joy and passion. And you can select those archetypal expressions and utilize them, so to say, in that scene. And you can craft belief systems that in many ways resonate with the positive expressions of those archetypes, thus allowing for you to experience that archetypal energy flowing through you as you navigate the idea of the challenge or situation. And this is just a little bit on how you can utilize archetypal energy in a way that is of service to you. For understand, you are already utilizing archetypal energy. It's just that many of you utilize it unconsciously. This is an exercise that can allow for you to, in that sense, draw upon the archetypes consciously so you can become, in that sense, a more conscious, lucid author of your experience of physical reality. And with that, we say to you the following: continue to dream your wildest dreams. Our unconditional love to you always, and we thank you for your participation in this co-creation. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. My love, joy, and appreciation to you.